Chapter 5 Awakening. The dragon was no longer than his forearm, yet it was dignified and noble. Its scales were deep sapphire blue, the same color as the stone, but not a stone, he realized an egg. The dragon fanned its wings. They were what had made it appear so contoured. The wings were several times longer than its body, and ribbed with thin fingers of bone that extended from the wing's front edge, forming a line of widely spaced talons. The dragon's head was roughly triangular. Two diminutive white fangs curved down out of his upper jaw. They looked very sharp. Its claws were also white, like polished ivory, and slightly serrated on the inside curve. A line of small spikes ran down the creature's spine from the base of its head to the tip of its tail. A hollow where its neck and shoulders joined created a larger than normal gap between the spikes. Eragon shifted slightly, and the dragon's head snapped around, hard. Ice-blue eyes fixed on him. He kept very still. It might be a formidable enemy, if it decided to attack. The dragon lost interest in Eragon, and awkwardly explored the room, squealing as it bumped into a wall or furniture. With a flutter of wings, it leaped onto the bed, and crawled to his pillow, squeaking. Its mouth was open pitifully, like a young bird's displaying rows of pointed teeth. Eragon sat cautiously on the end of the bed. The dragon smelled his hands, nipped his sleeves, he pulled his arm back. A smile tugged at Eragon's lips as he looked at the small creature. Tentatively, he reached out with his right hand and touched its flank. A blast of icy energy surged into his hand and raced up his arm. Burning in his veins like liquid fire, he fell back with a wild cry. An iron clang filled his ears, and he heard a soundless scream of rage. Every part of his body seared with pain. He struggled to move, but was unable to. After what seemed like hours, warmth seeped back into his limbs, leaving them tingling, shivering, uncontrollably. He pushed himself upright. His hands was numb, his fingers paralyzed, alarmed. He watched as the middle of his palm shimmered and formed a diffuse white oval. The skin itched and burned like a spider bite. His heart pounded frantically. Eragon blinked, trying to understand what had acquired. Something brushed against his consciousness, like a finger trailing over his skin. He felt it again, but this time it solidified into tendril of thought, through which he could feel a growing curiosity. It was as if an invisible wall surrounding his thoughts had fallen away, and he was now free to reach out with his mind. He was afraid that without anything to hold him back, he would float out of his body, and be unable to return. Becoming a spirit of the ether, scarred, he pulled away from the contact. The new sense vanished as if he had closed his eyes. He glared suspiciously at the motionless dragon. A scaly leg scrapped against his side, and he jerked back, but the energy did not shock him again. Puzzled, he rubbed the dragon's head with his right hand. A light tingling ran up his arm. The dragon nuzzled him, arching its back like a cat. He slid a finger over its thin wing membranes. They felt like old parchment, velvety and warm, but still slightly damp. Hundreds of slender vines pulsed through them. Again, the tendril touched his mind, but this time, instead of curiosity, he sensed an overpowering, ravenous hunger. He got up with a sigh. This was a dangerous animal, of that he was sure, yet it seemed so helpless crawling on his bed. He could only wonder if there was any harm in keeping it. The dragon wailed in a reedy tone as it looked for food. Eragon quickly scratched its head to keep it quiet. I'll think about this later, he decided, and left the room carefully, closing the door. Returning with 2 strips of dried meat, he found the dragon sitting on the windowsill, watching the moon. He cut the meat into small squares and offered one to the dragon. It smelled the square cautiously, then jabbed its head forward like a snake and snatched the meat from his fingers. Swallowing it whole with a particular jerk, the dragon pawed Eragon's hand for more food. He fed it, carefully to keep his fingers out of the way. By the time there was only one square left, the dragon's belly was bulging. He proffered the last piece. The dragon considered it for a moment, then lazily snapped it up. Done eating, it crawled onto his arm and curled against his chest. Then it snorted, a puff of dark smoke rising from his nostrils. Eragon looked at it with wonder. Just when he thought the dragon was asleep, a low humming came from its vibrating throat, gently. He carried it to the bed and set it by his pillow. The dragon's eyes closed, wrapped its tail around the bedpost, contentedly. Eragon lay next to it, flexing his hand in the near darkness. He faced a painful dilemma. By raising a dragon, he could become a writer. Myths and stories about writers were treasured, and being one would automatically place him among those legends. However, if the Empire discovered the dragon, he and his family would be put to death unless he joined the king. No one could, or would, help them. The simplest solution was just to kill the dragon, but the idea was repugnant, and he rejected it. Dragons were too revered for him to even consider that. Besides, what could betray us, he thought. We live in a remote area and have done nothing to draw attention. The problem was convincing Garo and Roran to let him keep the dragon. Neither of them would care to have a dragon around. I could raise it in secret, in a month or two. It would be too large for Garo to get rid of. But will he accept it? Even if he does, can I get enough food for the dragon while it's hiding? It's no longer than a small cat, but it ate an entire handful of meat. I suppose it'll be able to hunt for itself eventually. But how long until then? Will it be able to survive the cold outside? All the same, he wanted the dragon. The more he thought about it, the surer he was. However, things might work out with Garo, and Eragon would do everything he could protect it. Determined, he fell asleep with the dragon, cradled against him. When dawn came, the dragon was sitting atop his bedpost like an ancient sentinel, welcoming the new day. Eragon marveled at its color. He had never seen such a clear, hard blue. Its scales were like hundreds of small gemstones. He noticed that the white oval on his palm, where he had touched the dragon, had a silvery sheen. He hoped he could hide it by keeping his hands dirty. The dragon launched off the post and glided to the floor. Eragon gingerly picked it up and left the quiet house. Pausing to grab meat, several leather strips, and as many rags as he could carry, the crisp morning was beautiful. A fresh layer of snow covered the farm. He smiled as the small creature looked around with interest from the safety of his arms. Hurrying across the fields, he walked silently into the dark forest, searching for a safe place for the dragon to stay. Eventually, he found a rowan tree standing alone on a barren knoll. Its branches snow-tipped gray fingers that reached toward the sky. He set the dragons down by the base of the trunk and shook the leather onto the ground. With a few deft movements, he made a noose and slipped it over the dragon's head as it explored the snowy clumps surrounding the tree. The leather was worn, but it would hold. He watched the dragon crawl around, then united the noose from its neck and fashioned a makeshift harness for its legs, so the dragon would not strangle itself. Next he gathered an armful of sticks and built a crude hut high in the branches, layering the inside with rags and sashing the meat. Snow fell on his face as the trees sawed, however you pronounce it. He hung more rags over the front of the shelter to keep heat inside. Please, he surveyed his work. Time to show you your new home, he said, and lifted the dragon up into the branches. It wriggled, trying to get free, then clambered into the hut, where it ate a piece of meat, curled up and blankly coiled at him. You'll be fine as long as you stay in here, he instructed. The dragon blinked again.